Hey everyone, welcome to another session of Adobe Experience Manager. And Srikanth is there, who is a certified AEM architect. Without delaying, I will hand over the control to Srikanth, and he will explain what exactly today we're gonna cover and all those stuffs, right? So yeah, Srikanth, you can continue.
Thank you, Rajni. Hi, guys. As Rajni mentioned, my name is Srikanta Panikai, and yeah, I am a certified AEM expert. And today we are going to know about the architecture of AEM, little advanced structure. Okay. So yeah, without delaying, we'll start, and I'll try to make this video as smaller as possible. Okay. So you are able to see the screen.
Uh,
You're able to see on the screen that the architecture of AEM I have already plotted it. Okay, so usually architecture in the sense AEM has suggested that you should have two server of AEM publish, which will have two dispatcher server. Okay, and you will have one AEM author server. Okay, so author server will be, as I have already spoken about it on the previous video as well, that author server are meant for the developer who will go into the server and they will add or edit or update any changes they can modify on the server. Okay, but public server are the server, those are faced to the public end user. So when user is requesting for a URL, the request will directly come to AEM public server, they won't come to AEM author server. AEM author server are meant only for developer. Okay, so yeah, so if you see in the screen, I have plotted the complete AEM architecture, but there is a box I have plotted, the blue box. Whatever the blue box has been, I have plotted, that was the suggested AEM architecture by Adobe. Okay, so why I am speaking only that section? So when someone is asking or as part of the AEM certification exam, they will show the AEM architecture for related to the AEM's author server, publish server, and how dispatcher is connected with the publish server. Okay, so this is the standard architecture that they have provided. Now I have mentioned something more, something related to CDN. Okay, DNS and users are common. Only the additional information I have provided here is the CDN. So CDN is a optional requirement for the company if they wanted an additional cached requirement or additional redirect requirement. They can add a CDN layer to their system. Okay, but without the CDN as well, AEM is good to maintain and operate. Okay, but most probably AEM Adobe recommends to have a dispatcher layer for each public server. Even that is also optional. So what are the mandatory option? I'll tell you. So AEM server, sorry, AEM server author is definitely mandatory, which will be a server where there will be there will be an author team whose responsibility will be like go to the author server, log into the author server and check the pages. Like if there is a page, just let's take some example of a page called we will take the typical example of flipkart.com or amazon.com. They will just go to the home page and they will change the banner, they will change the text that is shown on the banner, they will change the list of products that is visible on the home page. So those kind of changes can be done by the authoring team on the AEM author server. If there's if the changes are done completely for a page, then they will start a process called publish. So they can publish the home page information to the AEM publish server. When they will press the publish button on the AEM author server, then the the information they have modified, that will start publishing to the AEM publish server. Okay, and that will how many publish server are there, that many publish server will get all those updated data. So here they have mentioned only two publish server for a standard architecture, but it depends on your requirement that you can have multiple publish server for your case. Okay. So this is the AEM standalone architecture I have shown, but in case of cloud, there won't be any much difference. However, the only difference will be there will be two cloud AEM public server and one author cloud server. Okay. If you require more, then they will keep adding the cloud server only, which is almost equal to the standalone server. Okay. Now, so AEM author are meant for author team. Now the AEM publish server are the end web page server that contains the exact information for the end user. Okay, so when a user actually try to get some information from the server, then they will go to the AEM publish server. Okay, and the AEM author server is only for the developers and authors to modify some content, but this won't be exposed to the internet, and only the AEM publish server will be exposed to the internet. Okay, now let's take an example that there is no dispatcher. So this dispatcher 1 and dispatcher 2 is not there, and even the CDN is not there. Okay, so in that case, this DNS is nothing called domain name system. So there in the internet, whenever we request a URL, so it will actually resolve the URL to an IP address of a server so that it can forward the request. So this is a standard requirement and standard process that happens for any of the technical stuff. Okay. So DNS is very simple, and it is always existing, whether it is included in the architecture or not. Okay. I have just shown that the way the request actually flows. Okay, DNS is mandatory for any of the architecture that we plot for any of the technologies. Okay, so our request actually comes from a user. There are three user I have plotted here, and those user has been putting making some kind of request, and those requests will come through the DNS. Okay, so let's take an example. The CDN is not there. That means the DNS will directly come to one of the AEM server. Okay, one of the AEM server based on their IP address. Okay, now there will be one problem because we do have two server. That means we do have two IP, and only one IP can be bound to the DNS. That's where we have to have only one server. If we do not have to, if we don't want to include the dispatcher. Okay, so that's where what we have to do. Either one of the public server will be the main instance, and based on the request, it can forward the rest of the request to the AEM server 2. Okay, public server 2. That is something we can do, and it is absolutely fine as part of the AEM. And even Adobe mentioned that you can do it if you do not have much request. For example, we do have only 30 user or only 100 user, so you can omit the dispatcher and CDN, and your request can directly come to server if there is no load on the server, and if you are anticipating that your project is not that much bigger to host on AEM, and AEM server, public server can be exposed to the internet as well. Okay, that is one case. Okay, but for example, you do have around a user base of 10,000 or more than that, and you feel that you wanted to have a safety guard on your AEM server in case for any load, in case any load comes. So there has to be some kind of a layer that should protect our AEM public server. So what happens whenever user comes? So let's take an example. We do have a user base of 10,000, and somehow they are making at one time. So every millisecond we are getting 10,000 hit to our AIM server, and it's absolutely fine. Our server can handle almost like 10,000, not a problem. But every millisecond, if we are getting 10,000 requests, so maybe our server may not be capable to handle. However, it still depends on your AEM processing unit, like which core, how many core are we are setting for our AEM server. So that will be provided by the AEM supporter, Adobe's AEM support team. So for example, we do have only very minimum requirement like one core to each server, and I'm assuming they do have a capability of only 10,000. And any request that comes more than 10,000, they will start going. They will start put it into a queue. But there are certain scenarios where in case of error or some reason your server might go crash and they will not be able to handle the request. If there are too many requests, they will start putting them into a uh, some kind of queue. Okay, apology for the noise from the background. There are a couple of kids next to my neighbor. They do a lot. Okay, so I'm so sorry. I'm hoping my audio is clear. Rajni, my audio is clear, right? Clear enough.
Yeah, it's clear, pretty clear.
Okay. Okay. Let's move ahead. So yeah. So most probably the request will come to the AEM server, and we can have our AEM server without the dispatcher layer as well. Okay. Now coming to the dispatcher. Dispatcher is put only for as part of the. There are several requirements we can complete by putting a dispatcher, and with the dispatcher there are several feature also comes in. Okay, some of them that is but before going to that, I can tell you that we can have only one dispatcher that can be connected to both the publish server as well. Okay, we don't need two dispatcher for two publish server. We just need only one dispatcher that can actually send the request to one of the publish server based on the uh, load. Okay, so the dispatcher can be used as a load balancer. We call it as load balancer. Okay, we will go through detail as well, not a problem. But yeah, at the on a basic level I'm speaking. If required, we will go on a deeper level as well. Okay, so dispatcher can be used as a load balancer. So for example, we do have a AEM server 1, publisher 1 and publisher 2. We call it publisher server. Okay, so publisher 1 and publisher 2, and we do have only one dispatcher that can be connected to both the publisher. So what happens, dispatcher can act as a load balancer. What is a load balancer? For example, there is any request that comes to dispatcher directly, it will check. Most probably they do have a logic, multiple types of logic. Based on the configuration, it can redirect the request to publisher 1, and when based on the logic, it can redirect the request to the publisher 2 server. Okay, and it will do based on certain logic. So there could be a logic like any request that comes, the first request, the all the odd request, odd number of requests will be going to the publisher 1, and even number request will be going to publisher 2. That can be done. Or every two requests will be put to publisher 1, then next publisher 2, and there are several different logic that we can write on the dispatcher configuration. So there is a configuration file we provide to the dispatcher server. So based on that, we can actually redirect the request to the different at a point of time, different publisher server. Okay, and it can possible that we can have multiple publisher server. So for example, we do have like 10 publisher server, and we do have one dispatcher as well. So there is no restriction on that. But it's still, we should always go as per the Adobe's recommendation, that Adobe recommends that how many publisher server you do have, try to put that much of dispatcher, because a dispatcher is um, kind of a web server which is mostly used for caching the static content. Okay, and it is comes as a free of cost. That's where Adobe recommends for each publish server have a dispatcher. And yeah, most probably it will be kind of a safety guard for your publisher server. Okay, now we will go to the complete so the complete recommended structure as part of the Adobe, that is in the blue box. Okay, we do have a AEM author server. It is not restricted to have only one AEM author server. We can have multiple author server, but the configuration will be quite different for multiple author server. For example, if we do have almost like more than 10,000 of authors throughout our global team, so in that case, we should have multiple author server, so that our author server won't be kind of a loaded with the request. Okay, however, but authors, if we do have multiple author server, there will be a multiple configuration that will be done to all the author server to make them sync between themselves. Okay, so that is one. But as part of the standard, it is never been a requirement. I've never seen as a requirement for any team that where we have to go for multiple author server. Usually all of the project has only one author server, and at max they might have around 20 authors, not more than that. Even they do have around 100 authors, it's not a problem to have only one author server. Okay, so it is most probably, most likely you will have AEM author server in your case, one AEM author server, and you might have multiple publisher server. But if we go for a standard architecture, then you might have two publisher server, and it will have respective two dispatcher server. Okay, so if we do have dispatcher server, most probably the DNS will come to one of the dispatcher, and which will act as a load balancing, and it can send the request, redirect the request based on the load to dispatcher 2 to publisher 2 or publisher 1. Okay, like that. That can happen, but in the standard, any of the most of our client prefer to have a CDN layer as part of our architecture. Okay, so what does CDN provide? So whichever capability will be provided by the dispatcher, so most of the capability of the dispatcher will be provided by CDN, but on top of that also CDN will act as a load balancer. Load balancer in the sense the actual endpoint to receive the request. Okay, which I have actually plotted the diagram on my screen. Okay, so for example, there are three users, and they are sending a request that will come to a DNS, and the DNS will resolve the request URL to an IP of a server, and that IP will be a CDN IP. So all those requests will come to CDN. Now CDN will automatically redirect to dispatcher 1 or dispatcher 2. Okay, now dispatcher 1 and dispatcher 2 will check the request is there in the I mean, whatever the request is coming, is it a static content? If it is a static content, is it cached in the dispatcher level? If it is there, then the request will go back to the request will have the response from the dispatcher 1 itself, and it will go back to CDN, where again CDN will cache the content, and the CDN will start rendering the data for the user on the browser. Okay, so from the next time the same request comes from the CDN itself, it will be responding to the user. Okay, now you might be wondering why, if the redirect if the content can be cached on the CDN, why do I have the dispatcher? Okay, so there is a couple of differences between dispatcher and CDN. CDN is completely on to the company whether they want it or not. But usually they do have they provide a CDN due to their advanced safety structure. So CDN not only cache the content, not only redirect your URL, but they do have some kind of a safety layer to make sure you don't get a DDoS attack, you don't get other kind of malicious attack, and you can block the request and at the CDN level. Okay, but in the dispatcher level, you have to configure yourself all those configuration. Even on the dispatcher level, this can be done, but you have to make sure all those configuration you have to provide to the dispatcher. Now, if you see for CDN, there will be a separate team. They can actually, and they have already built those configuration, which is kind of a long list of configurations related to safety or whatever those standards they do follow. If you want to do them, you will take a lot of time to configure on the dispatcher. That's where they most of the company prefers to have a CDN layer for their safety. Okay, so that will be the primary safety, and CDN team will be taking care of that. Okay, and all of those request logs will be captured on the CDN level. If the request comes till the dispatcher, then event dispatcher will capture all those logs or whatever the issues that is going with the request. Okay, so what happens in a simpler word I will tell now. So that user from the user, whenever the request comes through the DNS, it will be linked to one of the IP. Either it will be CDN. If CDN is not there, then one of the dispatcher IP will be linked to the URL. Okay, So once the request comes, CDN's main work will be it will convert your URL to a proper redirect URL if CDN is configured with. So if you are going with www.flipkart.com and maybe the URL has been set up something like just flipkart.com/home, which is the homepage URL. So automatically CDN will adjust the URL and it will start redirecting one of the dispatcher. Okay, if it has the cache data, it will respond from here, and if it doesn't, then it will go to the dispatcher, get the data, and it will respond. Now the dispatcher also will do similar, but in case what happens in the dispatcher, whenever we get a request, something called www.flipkart.com/home, now it will convert the URL into a AEM server URL structure, which we call it sling resource resolution. Will come to the next item. Okay, so that will again convert the URL into the AEM format, and it will try to grab the data. It will forward the request to the AEM publish server. Okay, so this is the basic request response flow along with the AEM architecture. Okay, I'm hoping that this is quite clear on the architecture level. Rajni, do you have any question regarding this?
No, Srikanth, it's clear.
Okay, so yeah, this is a basic architecture. If I have just plotted the arrows, I have not mentioned the kind of any more details, but just comment over it. I'll try to update the video or the slide to add more details if you need. If you think that I have missed something as part of the AEM architecture, then I'll start updating. Okay.